In this video, we're breaking down every draft class in the NFC West, giving each team a letter grade, and we're going to start with the Arizona Cardinals. First pick was Marvin Harrison Jr., one of the most pro-ready receivers that you'll ever see coming out of college. He runs routes like he's been doing cone drills since he was a toddler. He's got so many different releases. He's so deceptive off the line of scrimmage. He understands how to make corners uncomfortable and maximize the separation out of his breaks, and then outstanding ball skills and contested catchability. He makes some insane sideline adjustments. Doesn't have quite the second gear of someone like Malik Neighbors, but that statement applies to most NFL receivers, and I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is absolutely a good enough athlete for the NFL. At 27, they take Missouri defensive end Darius Robinson, 6'5", 285 pounds, long arms. He has the perfect build for a defensive end. He's got excellent play strength. He can stack and shed, control blocks. If you're trying to block him with a tight end, you're just handing him a TFL. As a pass rusher, he's not someone that's going to really threaten tackles with just pure speed around the edge, but he's a really good power rusher, and for someone that's new to playing on the edge, he's really skilled with his hands. As a bull rusher, he's got heavy hands into initial contact. He does a great job of engaging with low pad level, which is difficult for such a tall player, and then he drives his legs and walks the blocker back into the pocket, and then he also has a lot of methods of winning with his hands. His go-to move is the arm over or swim move, but he's got a double swipe, cross chop, forklift. Even though he's not someone that's going to just bend around the corner that consistently, he can win as a face-up rusher. I also like the Max Melton pick in the second round. He's so explosive from off coverage. He had a 136-inch broad jump, which I think absolutely shows up on tape. He's really good with his footwork and press coverage, but for someone with his arm length, I want him to strike with heavier hands at the line of scrimmage. If he can get more aggressive with his hands, I think he can be a really effective press corner. He was a really unreliable tackler last year, so you want that to improve. And he also had some issues when he was playing off man with just response time to the route break. When he's squaring up the route, if they make a quick break inside, he's a little bit late to respond and accelerate, but a ton of natural talent. I actually thought Max Melton had a really outside chance of sneaking into the first round. Like, he was my surprise first round pick. I've seen some people call it a reach, but I think this was good value. Their first third round pick was Florida State running back Trey Benson. He's got the size speed combination of a first round running back. He has really good vision and patience to set up his blocks, especially on gap scheme runs. Florida State ran a lot of power and counter. He doesn't have a single career fumble, and outside of the Syracuse game, which was kind of a disaster, he was really reliable catching the football. I think he absolutely has a third down skill set, and on top of that, he's a pretty solid pass protector as well. He has a nice stiff arm. He consistently falls forward through tackles, but he isn't very elusive in the open field. There were times he kind of struggled to make that last defender miss, and kind of related to that, my biggest issue with Trey Benson is just lateral fluidity and change of direction skills. If he's trying to make a sharp cut, he can't just plant on one foot and change directions. It's a bunch of throttle steps to slow down, and then he has to re-accelerate. And then I thought they kind of reached on the two Illinois players. I definitely like Isaiah Adams. He's a guard that was forced to play a lot of tackle for Illinois, and his tape at guard was so much better. If you just watch his tackle tape, he would look like an undraftable prospect, but when he's inside, he's got a strong anchor. He does a good job sliding his feet, excellent grip strength to stay connected once he gets his hands inside, and then he's a bully in the run game, especially on outside zone. Tip Ryman, I like as a player for what he is. I'm just not sure the value is really there in the third round. He's probably the best blocking tight end in this class. It's him or AJ Barner from Michigan. At 6'5", 271 pounds, like, he's closer to an offensive lineman than he is to a lot of these tight ends in the run game. He was pretty much an afterthought in the passing game. I viewed him as just a pure blocking specialist, but then he was one of the best testers at the combine. 96th percentile 10-yard split. Pretty much every drill was above 50th percentile. I guess there's theoretically some receiving upside. I just didn't think the combine testing really showed up on tape at all, and I didn't see much skill as far as route running and creating separation. Maybe they can unlock him as a receiver, in which case this would absolutely be worth a third round pick. I just thought he was more of a day 3 player because of how much projection there is in the passing game. And then I love the Elijah Jones pick at 90. He's kind of the great value Nate Wiggins of this class. He's tall tall and slender with long arms, explosive from off coverage, and really good top speed. Not only does he have enough speed to run with receivers vertically, he's so quick to access that top speed. There's just no delay from his transitions out of press. And the best thing that he brings to the table is his ball skills. He plays the ball down the sideline like a receiver. He's also really physical at the catch point. His interception against Syracuse, where it was like a dig route, he just rips it out of the receiver's hands. Probably the best play on his tape. And then he also has that last second closing burst to undercut a passing lane when he's playing kind of soft coverage. He had a few pass breakups and interceptions where he was outside leverage on an in-breaking route, and then he can make up that leverage in 1 or 2 steps to overlap the throw. He is an older player that's probably maxed out physically. You'd like him to add weight, but I don't know how likely that is. And I was disappointed with his competitiveness or lack thereof playing off of blocks. He's kind of passive engaging with blocks and doesn't really do much to try to work around them. I'm sure a lot of people will call this a reach. I didn't hear much Elijah Jones hype, but I think it was a really good pick. In the 4th round, they get Texas Tech safety Dadrian Taylor Dimerson, undersized safety with elite speed that makes up for a lot of his lack of size with just supreme violence and physicality in the run game. He's got to get more consistent with his eyes and zone coverage. He kind of stares in the backfield. A lot of times he needs to see the quarterback wind up before he can really break on the throw, but he has good ball skills. He's got the speed and explosiveness, and there are flashes on tape where he reads the play and makes a really nice break on like a hole shot or a dig route over the middle. I really like the value for Taylor Dimerson at the top of the 4th round. Xavier Thomas is a really skilled and explosive speed rusher. He has a quick first step, a lot of different ways of winning with his hands. He just doesn't have the length that you want, and he'll kind of get moved around in the run game. Their other 5th round pick was Texas tackle Christian Jones. He's a 4-year starter, has more career snaps than any offensive tackle in this class. He checks all the boxes for size and length. He plays with independent hands. He's really consistent picking up stunts and twists. His Achilles heel in pass pro is just sliding with inside counters. And then in the run game, he moves people off the line of scrimmage, finishes blocks consistently. Sometimes he kind of bends and leans into blocks and doesn't really engage with enough control, but I think he should be a plus in the run game. I had him 95th on my board, unless there's some kind of injury, like outside of the inside counters, I don't really see the major limitations with Christian Jones. And then Tejon Palmer in the 6th round is a freak athlete in terms of size and speed, very stiff changing directions, struggles to create separation out of breaks, and he was pretty clearly the easiest cover at the Shrine Bowl. And then their final pick was Miami cornerback Jaden Davis. I had not heard of him until they drafted him. I had to add him to my spreadsheet. Their one UDFA that I had written up was UNC defensive lineman Miles Murphy. He's a solid run defender, good size, kind of average athletic traits. I don't really see a whole lot of pass rushing upside there. So I'm going to give this class a B+. First 4 picks were really good. The Illinois players in the 3rd round I thought were a bit of a reach, especially Tip Ryman, but then they came back with Elijah Jones, Dadrian Taylor Dimerson, 2 of my favorite defensive backs in this class, and Christian Jones and Xavier Thomas were solid picks in the 5th round as well. Next up, we've got the LA Rams, who started off strong with Jared Verse at 19 overall. He's the best power rusher in this class. His speed to power is just devastating. He's actually pretty good with his hands. He just doesn't have great bend around the edge, so that kind of limits his ability to win around the outside shoulder, but I think it's a great investment in their pass rush for the future, and they can kind of try to rebuild Aaron Donald in the aggregate. Now, the Braden Fisk pick was one of my least favorite in the entire draft. I disagree with it from an evaluation standpoint, but also in terms of the draft capital they had to give up to move to 39. So as a player, he is extremely quick and explosive and has a relentless motor. He gives maximum effort on every play. He's got an explosive first step, and once you wind him up to his top speed, it's not dropping off until the whistle. But he really struggles to free himself from blocks in both phases. In the run game, he just gets moved off the line of scrimmage at will. I mean, it's not uncommon for him to be 8 yards past the line of scrimmage at the end of the play. And then as a pass rusher, he can win on stunts and twists. He can win if there's a protection miscue and he goes unblocked into the backfield, but he doesn't really have a lot of pass rushing moves, and even if he was better with his hands, I don't really think he has the length to free himself from contact. He also isn't able to consistently convert that speed into power. So I view him as like a rotational 3rd defensive lineman that you put in on passing downs. I don't think it's worth taking 1 or 2 down players in the top 50 of the draft, but it's not just that they took him at 39. They traded 52, 155 and a 2025 second rounder to move up. Every team has their own in-house trade value system, but this chart from ESPN Analytics has it as the biggest overpay in the last 6 drafts. In the third round, they took Michigan running back Blake Corum. Based on his 2022 tape, he was absolutely a top 100 pick. Last year, I thought was a major disappointment. He really struggled to power through contact or break tackles, but it's understandable because he's coming off the injury. He's still got great vision, does a really good job of identifying running lanes and traffic. Some similarities to Kyron Williams, although I think Williams has a much better third down skill set. This is earlier than I had him, but I don't hate the pick. And then their second third round pick was Miami safety Cameron Kitchens. He is a ball hawk, 11 interceptions in the last 2 seasons. His instincts, anticipation, and ball skills stack up with any safety in this class, but for every highlight play on his tape, he's got a coverage bust or a crucial missed tackle to kind of balance that out. There's a lot of times in coverage where he's just guessing and he'll abandon his assignment hunting for a big play. His down-to-down route recognition and play diagnosis is really inconsistent. Even on simple, just 2-man shot plays, he'll leave his assignment completely uncovered. He gets manipulated out of position by play action and misdirection, and he's a good enough athlete in terms of speed and quick first step to get where he's trying to go to make plays on the ball, but he doesn't have the reactive athleticism to recover from mistakes. There's clearly a lot of natural talent with Cam Kitchens, and he's a young player, but he's got to clean up the coverage busts, even if it comes at the expense of a couple takeaways. In the 5th round, they took Washington State edge rusher Brennan Jackson. He has good size and play strength, and I think if you just ranked this entire class by motor and effort level, Brennan Jackson and Braden Fisk would be in the top 4 or 5. That's clearly something that the Rams valued with this class. I also think Jordan Whittington, who we'll get to in a second, could make that list as well. He's a really good run defender, does a good job playing off of blocks. I just don't think there's a lot of pass rushing skill or upside. He doesn't really do much to set up his moves. His hand usage is pretty sloppy when he's trying to win around the outside, and he has a hard time generating much push with his bull rush, but I could see him being a solid early down defensive end. And then similar kind of story with Tyler Davis. He's a great run defender, just not the best athlete, and I don't really see much pass rushing upside. He has a good anchor, especially against single blocks, really quick hands to deconstruct blocks and take advantage of his opponent overextending or getting off balance. His pass rushing moveset is underdeveloped at this point, and he's another defensive lineman they took with really short arms, but he does have an explosive first step. I could see him developing into a decent bull rusher. They took Stanford kicker Joshua Carty, who I have not watched, and then Texas wide receiver Jordan Whittington. I don't really see as this dynamic separator, but he's kind of a dirty work type of receiver that could stick around as 4th or 5th on the depth chart. And their final 6th round pick was probably the best value pick in this class, Arkansas center Bo Limmer. He had some incredible combine testing, 99th percentile vertical jump, almost set the record with 39 reps on the bench press. He's a skilled zone blocker, explosive, fluid out in open space. He does a great job locating and connecting to targets at the second level. He is kind of lacking in play strength. He's got good technique setting his anchor, but that initial surge can kind of walk him back into the pocket a little bit. He's also very unbalanced. He overextends and kind of falls down, gets tripped up a lot. And then in pass pro, if you club his shoulder, for whatever reason, he's just really late to react and slide over. He's got the quickness to mirror more consistently as a pass blocker. He just got to up his reaction time. I also liked KT Leviston in the 2nd round, Kansas State tackle that's probably going to be a guard in the NFL. He definitely has the length to play tackle. I just don't think he has the lateral movement skills, but he's got heavy hands, really firm punch, needs to tighten up his hand placement and prioritize getting his hands inside more consistently. And he does a great job in the run game, especially at the second level. He's not the best athlete, but he's explosive enough to get out in space as a puller. And when he locates his target, he is erasing them from the play. The one UDFA I had written up was Kansas safety Kenny Logan. Some good ball production. I like his anticipation and zone coverage, just not a great athlete, and I think really limited in man-to-man situations. So I'm going to give this class a C-. The Braden Fisk pick and the trade up to 39 is the main thing that's really tanking their grade. And I also wish they would have addressed corner at some point. I felt like it was a pretty deep corner class. The 49ers had one of my favorite classes this year. I saw a table, I'll put it up on the screen, screen where it like combined all of the draft grades and they had the 25th highest average grade. I completely disagree with that. I thought they killed it this year. I'm usually not a fan of the Niners draft classes, and then it ends up not mattering at all, but this year I think they did a really good job. Their first pick was Florida wide receiver Ricky Pearsall, one of the best route runners in this class. Every step that he takes is purposeful. It's either to get downfield or manipulate the defender that's covering him, but he isn't just a technician. He's one of the best athletes in this class, extremely sudden, changing directions. He's explosive. He's got enough speed to win vertically, and his ball skills for the most part are outstanding. Just a 3.6% career drop rate. He's got some acrobatic one-handed catches and really difficult adjustments down the field on his tape. The main downside with Ricky Pearsall is that he's a little bit undersized and doesn't have exactly the production that you want to see, especially for a receiver. I'm normally someone that just trusts the tape, but I will say the track record of receivers that don't have high-level college production is not great. I still think with how the receivers were flying off the board and the fact that the 49ers clearly need a receiver, or at least are going to need one, it makes sense to take Ricky Pearsall at 31. Even though I have him ranked a little bit lower, I still like that pick. In the second round, they got one of my favorite corners in this class, Renardo Green out of Florida State. I'm sure this pick is being considered a reach by a lot of people, but he was one of the players that I was highest on relative to consensus. He had the most press coverage snaps of any corner in this class, 16 forced incompletions in 2023. He was just playing press man on an island with no safety help pretty much every snap, and it was still not worth targeting him. He has quick hands at the line of scrimmage, really smooth and patient footwork to mirror the release, and then he's extremely disruptive at the catch point, does a great job of raking at the ball. If the receiver's able to get a catch on him, he's alert to push them to the sideline before they can get their feet in bounds. He just has average size and athletic traits. That's the main reason that he fell to the second round. He gave up 3 touchdowns this past season. All 3 of them were to goal line fades, so I do worry about him getting high pointed in jump ball situations, and I thought his hips were kind of tight when it came to sinking with stop routes, but I loved Renardo Green's tape. He was clearly the best cornerback at the Shrine Bowl. All draft season, I've been standing on the table for him, and the 49ers take him in the second round. Love to see it. And then at 86, they get Kansas offensive lineman Dominic Pooney, who I had as a top 60 player. He played left tackle for Kansas. At the Senior Bowl, he was working at tackle, guard, and center. I think he's best at guard projecting to the NFL. He's a powerful run blocker. He's a mauler out in open space, but he also gets to those second level climbs under control and makes sure to secure contact. He's got a solid anchor. He has advanced hand usage and pass protection. And the most impressive thing about Dominic Pooney is his slide quickness and lateral fluidity. He had a 4.4 flat short shuttle, which is 99.5 percentile. He can mirror pass rushers up and down the arc. He can take really aggressive jump sets, and then he's got the backwards recovery skills to retreat and get back into position. Going through his tape, I had a hard time figuring out exactly what the downside of Dominic Pooney is. There were a couple times when he gets to the top of the rush where he'll kind of open up the inside shoulder and allow the pass rusher to counter in through the B gap, and he just has average arm length for a guard, but outside of that, I think he's a really solid prospect. And another really good pick at 124, taking Wake Forest safety Malik Mustafa. He has a unique build for a safety, just 5'10 with short arms, but he weighs 209 pounds, and he's a ferocious tackler, so much stopping power, but also really good form and consistent wrap-up technique. There's a lot of aspects of his game where he plays like just a aggressive downhill box safety, but he has a really fluid back pedal. He can get depth quickly, weave and change directions to play routes over the top. He's really consistent about identifying trick plays and double moves. He quickly processes motions and backfield action and identifies his assignment. So there's a lot to like with Malik Mustafa, but I think he also needs some work before he's ready to be a starter. His field vision was very inconsistent. He had a difficult time recognizing backside digs and dagger concepts. There's a lot of plays where he's, the robber safety, and it's like his only responsibility is to break on an in-breaking route from this side of the formation, and he just doesn't have, I guess, the spatial awareness to really sense it quickly enough and then get into proper position. His size also kind of limits his ability to win at the catch point. He can get bodied by tight ends in jump ball situations, but still a young player and a top 100 player in this class for me. At 124, I think this was great value. And then a few picks later, they took Louisville running back Isaac Garindo. Had the best combine performance of any running back in this class, 4.33 in the 40-yard dash, 41.5-inch vertical, and he did did all that at 6 foot, 221 pounds. So dream combination of size, speed, and explosiveness, but the explosiveness doesn't really translate to acceleration and a quick first step. When he has a clear runway to build up speed, once he reaches that top speed, you're not catching up with him, but he's not a player where you just give him a little bit of daylight and then in the blink of an eye, he's at top speed. He's also a little bit clunky getting through the line of scrimmage. He kind of runs into blockers and stalls his momentum. I think his rhythm and timing needs some work to set up his cutbacks. He is really explosive out of his jump cuts. And then I think he can offer a lot as a third down back. He's a solid pass protector. He's consistent catching the ball, and he only has 273 career touches. So even though he is kind of on the older side, there isn't a lot of tread on the tires. And then they finished off the 4th round with Arizona wide receiver Jacob Coing. Of all of the undersized route running slot receivers in this class, Jacob Coing was my favorite. He has blazing speed. He's really explosive out of horizontal breaks, and he does a great job of using the stem and footwork at the top of the route to set up his breaks. Because he's so fluid and light on his feet, he can run complex routes with a lot of extra footwork, and there isn't very much delay throwing on a couple extra steps of window dressing. Now, he is very undersized, extremely limited in contested catches, but as a slot receiver that can just torch off coverage, I think this is a great pick in the 4th round. So they started off the draft 6 for 6. They take USC guard Jarrett Kingston in the 6th round. I didn't watch Jarrett Kingston, but I do know he tested really well. And then in the 7th round, they took Florida State linebacker Tatum Bethune. There are some limitations, and it's why I had a 7th round grade on him. He isn't the biggest linebacker, not a great athlete, but I think there's a lot to like with his game. Even though I had a 7th round grade, I really think he's an intriguing prospect. He's one of the better cover linebackers in this class. I don't know if I evaluated a linebacker or a safety that was more consistent against play action and play action leak concepts. There had to have been 6 or 7 plays on his tape where they tried to just run play action and sneak out a tight end down the seam, and he recognized it and covered it up every single time. There's a 3-play sequence in the Louisville game if you want to check it out. I think it was 3rd quarter. They're in the red zone. 1st down, he gets a run stop out in the alley. 2nd down, he gets a pass breakup in the end zone. 3rd down, they go right back to him, and he's in man coverage down the seam, gets an interception in the end zone. He's undersized, but he's a really good block shedder. If I had to pick a 7th round or UDFA linebacker to make an impact this year, my pick would be Tatum Bethune. And I had 3 of their UDFAs written up. Evan Anderson was one of my favorite UDFAs this year. He's a space-eating nose tackle, but he's actually got an explosive first step, and he's really quick and skilled with his hands. Not a player with a ton of pass rushing upside, but I think he can be solid on early downs and give you something pressuring the quarterback. Cody Schrader is just a ready out of the package outside zone runner. Not a great athlete, and he's undersized, but he knows how to read wide zone. And then Michigan center Drake Nugent has a ton of experience. He's a pretty solid zone blocker. He just isn't strong enough to hold up in the run game. He's got to add some play strength if possible. So I'm going with an A- for the 49ers. This was one of my favorite classes. I feel like every single pick was good value and made sense. I had them up there with the Chargers initially as one of the 2 classes that I gave an A, but the more I thought about it, I just wish they did more to address the offensive line, which I feel like is what got them beat in the Super Bowl. I really like Dominic Pooney. He has some tackle versatility, but I think he's best at guard. I would have preferred them to take a couple swings at offensive line, with one of them being a surefire tackle prospect. So that would be my one criticism, but I love this class. If you've watched all of these draft grade videos, you know I'm a very tough grader. A- to me means you knocked it out of the park. And finishing up with the Seattle Seahawks, they had arguably the best first 2 picks of anyone in this class. I would say it's between them and the Indianapolis Colts. They get Byron Murphy at 16, who was my highest graded defensive player in this class. Elite explosiveness and lateral quickness to win the edge as a pass rusher. He had the highest pass rush win rate of any defensive lineman in 2023. He's got a really quick club rip. He'll use a push-pull later in the rep if he's playing the run early. And then he's able to translate that first step quickness and natural leverage into a devastating bull rush. He still has room to improve as far as hand usage rushing the passer. I wouldn't say he's on the level of someone like Johnny Newton, but compared to most defensive linemen coming out, I would say he's still ahead of the curve. And then despite being a little bit undersized, he is a really good run defender. tackler. He's borderline dominant against single blocks. He does a great job of flowing with outside zone and outpacing reach blocks, keeping his play side hand free. Against double teams, he gets really low to the ground. Sometimes he's even like crawling on the ground, laying on his stomach, and then he bounces back up into the backfield. But when he has to just straight up take on a double team, he will get moved back and flattened occasionally. But Texas had him playing mostly nose tackle, so ideally in the NFL, he's not going to have to take on as many double teams as he did in college. So love the first pick. And then at 81, they get a top 40 player for me, UConn guard Christian Haynes, one of the best zone blocking offensive linemen in this class. He's got the hip fluidity to win reach blocks consistently. I think one of the most telling indicators when evaluating an offensive lineman is looking at how do they block on the backside of outside zone, and some of the backside cutoffs on Christian Haynes tape are just mind-blowing. He's explosive getting to the second level, has a really high finish rate on linebackers, and then in pass pro, he has really good slide quickness and mirror skills. He has good hand usage. He can refit his hands throughout the rep. He doesn't have the best anchor. He will give some initial ground to bull rushes, but he has the technique and the lower half flexibility to set his anchor and eventually resist that bull rush. Unless there was some kind of injury or teams were just really scared about his hand size, I don't understand why he fell to the third round. He's a player that I would have understood a team taking in the late first even. So the two most important picks I really liked. Now their fourth round, I was not a big fan of. At 118, they took Tyrese Knight. He's got decent size and athleticism, but very slow play diagnosis. He just gets lost against the run. There's multiple plays on tape where the entire UTEP defense is rallying to the football and he's like chasing the back end of some fly motion on the other side of the play. He has potential to develop into a block shedder, but he doesn't have a quick, forceful punch to free himself from blocks. And even though he's shorter, he plays really upright and doesn't have the base strength to hold his ground at the point of attack. He ends up on the ground pretty frequently. He has 5 career forced fumbles. He's a pretty solid tackler, and I think he has decent coverage instincts, but this is probably a few rounds too early for me. AJ Barner, I also had graded lower than where they took him. I think it's more about how do you value him as a player than the actual evaluation. He's up there with Tip Ryman as one of the best blocking tight ends in this class, but very limited production or skill set as a receiver. If they really wanted a run blocking specialist and valued that in the fourth round, then that's fine. But if they're hoping to get a lot of receiving value from AJ Barner, I wouldn't be that optimistic. But then later on day 3, they took 2 cornerbacks out of Auburn that I really liked, Nehemiah Pritchett in the 5th round and DJ James in the 6th. Pritchett is an aggressive press corner. He can mug you at the line of scrimmage. He's explosive from off coverage, and he's got the recovery speed to keep up with receivers down the field. He's just more of a stiff lateral mover, not as sticky in man coverage. He's someone that's got to win at the line of scrimmage to really win the rep. And then DJ James is in a lot of ways kind of the opposite player. He's more of the smooth, fluid mirror man corner. They're both really fast. DJ James, I didn't see him get stacked down the field one time. And I don't know if there's a player in this class whose athleticism on the field was more counter to what their combine testing showed. DJ James can just effortlessly change directions to mirror route breaks, but he had a 6th percentile shuttle and a 3.6 percentile 3-cone. The biggest issues with DJ James, number one is weight. He's 175 pounds, 7th lightest cornerback in combine history. But after that, I would say he's the rare college corner that needs to be more aggressive with his hands down the field. He almost tries to do too much with his footwork and just mirror breaks without even getting in phase, making contact. If he would just stick a hand up, not even to grab, just to feel out the break, I think he'd have a lot more success. And then circling back to their other 6th round pick, Utah tackle Satoa Lamea. I assume he's going to be a guard in the NFL. I didn't really see a tackle skill set on his tape. His highlights in the run game are as dominant as anyone, just some insane displacement off the line of scrimmage. He's got the hip fluidity to win really difficult reach blocks on the backside, but he was just oblivious to inside counters in the run game. He's got a one-track mindset. If you don't flow exactly to his aiming point and you just cut inside, he's not going to put up any resistance. And then his pass pro was almost a disaster. He would underset, overset, his outside hand would get swiped and he'd lose the corner. He'd get beat with inside counters over and over again. There's a chance that if and when he moves to guard, all of those problems get fixed, but I definitely do not see it at tackle. And then they take Michael Jarrell out of Findlay, who I didn't watch. Had a really good 10-yard split, 40-yard dash, and vertical jump, but don't know anything outside of that. As for UDFAs, I had 2 of them written up for the Seahawks. Garrett Greenfield, tackle out of South Dakota State. He's a fairly technically sound pass blocker, at least with his hands. He's got a bad habit of stopping his feet through contact, and he doesn't really give you much in the run game at this point. And then I also had Washington tight end Jack Westover written up. Very undersized, pretty solid hands, but I don't see too much upside. So I'm going to give the Seahawks a B+. Slam dunk first 2 picks. Didn't really like the 4th rounders, but I thought they got some good value with the Auburn corners.